Being Black in America comes with its challenges. However, we understand that enlightenment through education is the oppressor's worst fear. By bridging the gap between academia and the people, our purpose is to equip you with knowledge that breaks down barriers during your journey towards truth and freedom. Welcome to the Black and Highly Dangerous Podcast.
Yo, Daph, what's up? What's up? How's it going? How's this week been? I know you're out of town.
Yes, my week was glorious. I went to Scottsdale, Arizona. It was like part 2 of my birthday celebration.
Okay.
And oh my God, it was just so relaxing. And
Nice.
I think people might think like Scottsdale, Arizona, like such a random place to like want to go vacate. But this is actually our third time like vacationing in Scottsdale because, well, one time it was Sedona and then we spent like a night in like Scottsdale. But they have the best resorts. Like they have so many resorts and you know, it was just really nice. We had 2 cabana days.
Oh, nice.
And we one day we actually went into like Old Town Scottsdale because they had a bunch of wineries. And child, we ended up having a conversation with this nice gentleman. He was older and he was just asking us why we were visiting and all of these things. And then he introduces himself as the mayor.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, you know, it was somebody that was really interested in like talking to him. So he like interrupted the conversation. So me and John, we both on the phone, like Googling. Like, yeah, we got to know, like, what's your politics?
Yeah, that's about to say.
What's your politics? He was independent. So
Okay.
like,
That's interesting. Being independent, that's rare, I would say a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much out there.
Yeah. And it's funny because we were leaving like once the guy had interrupted anyway. So we were like, you know, deuces, we'll see you. And he actually chased after us outside to get a selfie with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was really nice. So that was like really random. But we just really enjoyed ourselves. It has me rethinking my whole life. So, you know, I've been on this deep work kick in terms of like working in the morning and like putting shallow work in the afternoon. But it's like, okay, what does leisure look like in the afternoon? Child, I'm about to have to start doing some cabana days in Philly. I don't know, found a hotel that has like cabana rentals.
Oh, nice.
I will be doing that.
No, that's good. No, that's what's up. I've always heard good things about Arizona. I know that's one of the places that Kristen wants to go to, and she talks about Sedona in particular. So when we get around, you know, to that time point, I'm pretty sure I'll hit you up, see where you stayed, because I always hear good things about Arizona, even though it's not. I really never thought about it till Kristen started mentioning it. I'm like, Arizona, who want to go out there? You know, this East Coast kid. Don't think about too many places outside of, you know, LA and when we think about the West Coast. So now that's cool to hear that you had a good time out there and met the mayor. Scottsdale too. Scottsdale and Sedona, and of course, Phoenix, right?
Phoenix, like they're all like right there. So you fly into Phoenix, which is spring break. So when we were leaving, like the airport was packed.
Oh yeah, spring break.
But Sedona is really nice. You can fly into. There are like 2 different airports you can fly into, and it's like I think like a 40-something minute drive. It's a beautiful drive because you see like the mountains and like the way the sun just reflects. It's beautiful. So we want to do Sedona again, but it can get kind of expensive.
I bet.
We had to do Scottsdale, but yeah.
That's what most time I hear about Sedona is because we're watching these reality TV shows, and that's where all these, you know, people with money be. So I can already imagine.
What money reside. Yes. I think when we went, we found like a really good deal on a resort. And so, yeah, that's why and it was like January. So it wasn't quite warm. It wasn't like pool weather, but it was still really nice.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. I'm going to check it out. Well, I'm glad you had a nice, eventful, relaxing week because I was just doing my normal Working. No
life.
beach, no cabanas, no meeting the mayors, no jet setting. But it is what it is. I am looking forward to next week is our spring break. So definitely want to make sure I finish up all my little to-do list items this week, grading and all that stuff, so I can just relax. Father-in-law will be here this week. So it'll be good that we'll actually have some more assistance. And Kristen, she's taking a few days off as well during my spring break. So that'll be fun. So I don't know, maybe we'll see a movie or something, do something chill, since we'll have a little help once again with the in-laws coming to support and, watch the baby.
Do you want to see Batman?
I've heard a lot of great reviews about it. So I did tell Kristen I want to see it, but I heard it's 3 hours as well. I'm like, it's a long chunk of my day that I'm about to watch a movie. But I did hear good reviews, so I'm debating mainly because of the time length about it. But we'll see. It will eventually be out on streaming services, so I can definitely spend 3 hours at home watching it than being at a movie theater all that time.
Yeah, I thought about suggesting it to John this week because we're just trying to find more things to just do to get out of the house. But 3 hours, it's I want to have an interlude. And
yeah, we need a break, stretch my legs. That's a long time. So yeah, we'll see. I'm sure we'll find something to do, go out to eat like we normally do. And, maybe we'll look for something different that we haven't really done before, but it's still kind of cool out. It would be nice if it was warmer, but it's what it is. At least I won't have to teach and go to work and do that commute, especially with these gas prices right now. These things over here in Jersey, they're about $4. I think I seen one is about $4.20 at the moment, which is absurd. And I seen places in Cali with $6 something, which is I'm getting a bike because there ain't no way I'm driving paying those $6 per gallon. That's wild, especially when you're stuck in traffic and stuff. Now I'm even more upset because I feel like I'm just wasting extra gas more than normal. Talk on that coin being wasted in these gas tanks. So, that's been a big issue too this week.
Yes, I have heard. And I think it's starting to impact air travel because I know John had been looking for some flights maybe for us to go to Nashville or other places. And the prices are $600 something. It's $600-$700 for a normal trip.
Yeah, see, not playing with that. I know Chris and I were going to visit my parents in May. And the funny thing is we bought once. We bought our tickets early, a few weeks ago because of when we started hearing them rumblings about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And then we saw people talking about gas prices and stuff. So we were like, let's do this now because we're sure that these ticket prices are about to skyrocket once, if things do hit the fan, which they did. And so I'm glad we kind of went on those instincts and let's not play with these oil prices because we know it affects all kinds of travel, not just, your commute. So yeah, I can see it. So I know a lot of people are going to be staying put for a little while now.
Yeah.
Ain't buy your tickets yet. Them things are going to probably be about double the price because gas prices pretty much doubled as well, or will double. Get close to it.
What I'll probably do, since my schedule is a little bit more flexible, I'll probably, how Google will show you the price per day. I'll just choose the least expensive days if I want to, because I've been meaning to make my way to Chattanooga to visit my god baby and visit my family, and it's just been too long. So I'm gonna just have to find some convenient days.
Yeah, no, that's the best way. That's the best approach to flexible scheduling. Makes life a lot easier. But okay, all good. We are, for our listeners who listen to us in strictly audio version, just a reminder, we are on YouTube again. This will be something we're going to be doing consistently. So check us out. I know a few of you checked this out. I know a couple of our listeners hit us up on Instagram. It was like, oh, wow, I'm not, I've been listening to your voices for so long. I'm not used to actually putting a face to the voices. And I was like, yes, it's new to us too. We're getting used to it, but we're glad y'all are, tuning into the different platforms and different channels because we know some people are visual learners. And so we're just trying to add that component for you all and expand the brand a little bit. So we appreciate that. So please spread the word that we're on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube. If you are listening and watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like button. I know my brother, he's a big YouTuber, so he was like, make sure you tell people to hit the like button and comment because that helps with the algorithms, and so more people will find us that way, and I guess we'll come up on the search boxes. So please, if you do listen, even if you're not watching fully, just hit the like button before you stop the video, and that'll help us out. So we'll get to today's special topic. We're going to cover a topic today that's pretty interesting to Daphne and I. But before we do that, let's get to some Oh Lord news, and then we'll talk about today's topic.
Hello, and welcome to BHD News, where we give you the most current and eye-opening Oh Lord news of the week. Join us as we present news that'll make you want to say,
Okay, so speaking of gas prices, they have people out here doing some very desperate things.
Oh boy, I can only imagine.
Oh goodness. So I had already told you that ATL Atlanta have been going a little bit wild since the pandemic. But I actually read a story and found out that people are drilling holes in cars to steal gas, causing hundreds of dollars in damage.
That's crazy. That is crazy. It's just started though. It's only been like 3 or 4 days. And so people already going to that extreme. I can only imagine the next couple of weeks as it gets worse, because that's some wild stuff.
Yeah, so this story is from Wednesday. And I mean, it could, like I said, Atlanta wild anyway, so you know. So what people are doing is like going underneath the car and drilling and then taking the gas that way, which I'm pretty sure with the drill and potential sparks, that's probably really dangerous.
Probably not, yeah.
But yeah, somebody said it cost them like $2,000 worth of damage. And of course, they didn't even know until they tried to start their car.
You try to leave, yeah. Well, that's good to know. I'm glad you mentioned that story, so we can be on our P's and Q's as well. So I'm sure it's not going to be just isolated to Georgia with folks trying to steal gas.
Well, when people hear the news, I feel like, oh, that's a good idea. Kind of like the Apple AirTags. Like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, no, that's not a good idea, folks. Please don't be out here stealing people's gas. But it is, I guess it is a commodity now. It is worth something. If you can, I wonder if they're going to be like bootleggers for gas now. I'm pretty sure there will be folks are doing that. So be careful. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see a lot more crazy stories. I'm sure this won't be the only Oh Lord news story related to gas coming up in these next couple weeks.
So do you rent cars, Tyrell?
I haven't rented in a while, but yes, I have.
Well, I mean, although you haven't rented in a while, there is a possibility, if you have rented from Hertz, that there could be a warrant out for your arrest.
A warrant out for my arrest? Oh, no. Well, nah, I doubt that.
No, that's what hundreds and hundreds or thousands of other people thought as well. So there's actually a class action, or I think someone's trying to file a class action suit against Hertz because they have a regular practice of reporting cars stolen, even though they have been returned.
What?
Yes. And dozens and hundreds of people have actually been impacted. One Black man in Florida actually got convicted of it, and it derailed his race as a state representative.
Oh, wow.
And it has, like, that happened in like 2013, and only this year was his case vacated after like the news and all of these cases that Hertz has been allegedly filing false police reports.
No way. Luckily, I've never rented from Hertz.
Okay, so that's why
I'll be in the clear. But did they say why they do that practice? Is there some kind of financial incentive with that or something?
Well,
some write-off?
According to Hertz, it's like, oh, if people turned it in late. But see, the issue with the Black man in Florida is that he would call every week to renew it. They actually were taking the money out of his account. They still took him to trial and he was still convicted, although he had the records with the money coming out of his account, like the same with other people. And Indianapolis and one other state or city airport, they actually stopped taking police reports from Hertz after like multiple investigations found the cars on their lots.
Oh wow!
So if they just misplaced the car, they'll say it's
say it was stolen.
Mm-hmm. And there was one particular case where one of the Hertz employees actually testified in court that their practice is not to update the police reports, even if they have the updated information, because they don't want to be in a position where police stop taking their reports.
Mm-hmm,
so even when they have the updated information, they just push forward with it anyway.
Yeah, no, that. Whoever's suing them, you need to sue them and you need to get all your money, because that is a terrible practice. One, you just hit people with late fees. Any kind of other rental service, it's a late fee. If somebody actually steals a car and you can't get in contact with them, that's one thing. But yeah, with that kind of business practice, you don't report it stolen, because now you have folks' names in the system, and now when they get stopped, they're losing opportunities for something that they didn't even do. They did not even steal a car. Maybe they returned it late, sure, but it's not stolen. And the fact that you're not updating it, yeah, you're going to be held liable for some things, because it's an easy case to win, right? You just said, I brought the car back. They have it. Albeit late, it wasn't stolen, and no charges were pressed. So yeah, they're going to have to divvy up a nice. I know they're already in a lot of financial trouble because of the pandemic. And so yeah, this may be crippling for them, get them out of business for sure.
Yeah, one of the issues is that like these people who have been subject to sometimes prosecution because of these claims, they actually want to be included in their bankruptcy filing. So there were some people who were able to get their name as like creditors before like a particular filing date. And so one of the issues that's going back and forth is some people who have been impacted by this didn't even know that they could be a part of that. And so Hertz is trying to fight new people being able to join. So it's a hot mess. I will post the article. So
yeah, no, that's crazy.
Yeah, I have rented with Hertz. Lord, please don't let me have a warrant out for my arrest. Although I guess it would be for John, because he's the one that always put his name on it, but he don't deserve a warrant either.
Yeah, no warrant.
Okay, so for one of my last stories, so I'm living on the East Coast. I've been enjoying it. You know, Philadelphia is really awesome, but child, with the news that I just heard, I am trying to make my way out of here really soon, because the East Coast is expecting a big invasion of Joro parachuting spiders.
What? No.
They are expected to start covering the entire East Coast around late May, early June. And like, if you Joro, Joro, they are huge. Yeah, they're from Asia. And they parachute in. So just flying from the sky. And we're expecting an invasion on the East Coast this spring.
Wait. But how, like, where are they coming from? Like, how are they here just flying from the sky?
So it was said, what I read is that they had probably made their way to the United States, like in like cargo or something like that from Asia. And they had been in Georgia for a while, but for some reason they are expected to like multiply and like blossom and fly and all of these different places. So
no way. That's if I can't imagine just being out a stroll with Maya or something and just start seeing spiders falling from the sky. That's a terrifying. That's almost like a horror movie, like one of those kind of it was like arachnophobia.
Yeah, arachnophobia.
Kind of
Yeah, considering how afraid I am of spiders, that's like a worse fear. I mean, the good thing is their fangs are so like small that they probably wouldn't be able to penetrate skin. If they did bite you, the bite, they said, would be kind of similar to like a wasp sting or like a bee sting or something like that. So, but still, they are big and ugly, and I don't want them touching me.
Yeah, no flying spiders. So yeah, I'll definitely be on the lookout for that. Looking for those new stores. Hopefully they stay in Philly. Don't across the border to Jersey.
God, you ain't right. You're right. The one last thing, and I think you may have mentioned it last week, but in case you didn't, how Texas is investigating parents of trans children for child abuse if they give them puberty blocking drugs.
Yeah, that's been that was a big case. I don't know if I mentioned that last week. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
It might have been like me having a conversation with somebody else, but it's just like, that is definitely oh Lord news. It's so ridiculous. And it's like the state is just, it's like red states are going to potentially become unsafe for people with certain identities. And that's probably how they want it.
Yeah. And this has me thinking about the future of this country when you start having more states. Me and my students were just having a conversation about this. We're just talking about, my race, crime, and punishment class, and talking about like what has been more beneficial for, Black folks, right? Is it federal laws, federal statutes, or state statutes? And they came to the conclusion like, yes, federal statutes are important to push for because it stops states like this from doing these extreme, ridiculous laws, and everybody has to follow a set standard. And so when you give more state rights, which I know is important, but when these states start going too far one way or another, it becomes problematic. And like you said, very dangerous for folks living or who have certain identities and for marginalized communities. And so this is why, Daph and I have talked about this several times on this podcast, why it's important for us to pay attention to what's going on politically, national level, Supreme Court justices, all these kind of things, these cases, because they set the standard. And so, I have a couple friends who are Black who were considering moving to Texas, but they don't know if that's they're going to happen now, right? And that stuff like this is going to hurt Texas as well, because it's going to be, I feel like diversity just enhances everything in the state, right? The more diverse population you have, walks of life, thought, thinking, etc., it just is just a better everything for the community, for the state. And so I don't know, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot if they keep this up.
Agreed.
So keep our eyes on it for sure. I guess along those lines, Florida State Senate recently passed a bill talking about making abortions illegal after 15 weeks. So, Florida is always one of those other states that's always in the headlines talking about things like abortion and all these other kind of ridiculous laws that are coming about. And we predicted this because of the cases we saw before with them suing places like Texas, et cetera. And then Florida picked it up very quickly after, and now actually putting these things into law, which I think is expected to go into effect July 1st. So I just mentioned these things because I know we have listeners in all these states and listeners that are may identify in such ways or have certain life challenges. And it's just good to be recognized, use our platform just to raise awareness on what's going on in some of these states, because it can be troubling if you find yourself in one of these situations.
Agreed. Very. It's like all of those states are trying to like race to the bottom in terms of just how low can we go in terms of violating people's rights that they should be federally allowed.
For sure. Which is, it's just sad because, we have Democrats majority everything and still can't stop this stuff. It's like, okay, if this is happening under a majority Democratic, cabinet, presidency, Congress, etc., what can happen if it flips or when it flips, and what kind of things would we see? And we know, we talked about in this podcast, we know Republicans get things done. And so it's like, if they're leading or are leading the majority of everything, would they try to actually make some of these stuff into federal law? Would they have that power? That's some scary stuff to think about. Now that they're seeing the potential of what can happen with these smaller states, well, not the small states, but these states doing what they're doing. So only time will tell. Only time will tell. Another story about states. States are actually leading and having an investigation into TikTok. Did you see this? It's actually a bipartisan investigation as well. A bipartisan group of state attorneys. They're trying to look to see if TikTok negatively affects the health and mental health of younger teens and younger users. They feel like that this app is violating the consumer protection laws. And so now they're doing this kind of nationwide look into the ramifications and consequences of TikTok. I'm not sure fully what kind of harm they're expecting or they're saying happens as a result. I guess that'll come out. But it's weird. I know they're saying that they think these children, more TikTok children, are more likely to experience things like anxiety and social pressures and depression compared to other uses of other apps and stuff. So I thought this was just interesting. I don't know. I feel like there's some kind of, I don't know, some kind of underlying something that's not coming out yet, because it's just like we have tons of social media apps, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all these things. And why are y'all coming at TikTok all of a sudden? So I wonder if there's some kind of money game behind it, because it doesn't really make all the sense, because what you can find for TikTok, I'm sure you can find for these other social media services. So I'm not sure why they're just pinpointing that, but it will be something to keep an eye out to see what happens as a result.
That's interesting. I know some people that work at TikTok, I'll, have to inquire about what's going on. But I do know TikTok, they look into these types of things on their own. But most of those big tech companies have research teams that try to study the impact of their, application or website on various populations. So it will be interesting.
Yeah, it will be. It will be. Final story is so this story on, and this kind of maybe gets us to our topic a little bit today too, about Black upward mobility. And it was a report on CNBC, but it actually came from the Census Bureau. So, with the census that happened a couple years ago, we're starting to see more research articles and findings come out of it. And they're saying that one of the things that's linked to Black upward, or the strongest predictors of Black upward mobility, especially for younger folks in many communities, has to do with mentorship opportunities. So it's pretty much having a successful adult Black population has shown to have really strong effects for Black youth pursuing careers and getting to a medium or higher than normal income, et cetera, when they have internship opportunities. And they're saying communities that have a lot of poverty, a lot of the workforce, the workforce is unemployed or jammed up in the criminal justice system, like incarceration. So there's a lack of Black mentorship. So they just felt that this was important as folks are trying to create more equity economically for marginalized communities, particularly Black community. It's one thing that advocates should pay attention to is make sure that there's Black mentors out there, and it'll better the chances of the youth. And I can see that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is why a lot of white folks are successful, because they have a social network of folks that are in kind of different professions and tax brackets. And so they're able to put them on the game or point them to certain opportunities. And so I think, it's the same practice, I would say, if we just don't have enough of that. And it's good that they're finding these kind of things, and now we can pinpoint better strategies to help out our Black youth.
Yeah. That was actually the case prior to desegregation, when Black people all lived in the same area. So you had the pastor, the doctor, the dentist, the, blue collar worker, all living in the same neighborhood. And you had children who had access to various, all of that. And, once desegregation happened and people with the means moved away, then that created a circumstance where what William Julius Wilson talks about as the truly disadvantaged being kind of isolated in inner city neighborhoods with limited resources, with limited social capital in terms of access and networks to those with higher earning potential. So,
no, for sure. Yep. Social capital and human capital, all that kind of stuff, you lose. They lost. And that's the issue with integration, right? It's supposed to be a two-way street. It was just a one-way street. Therefore, Black exodus, and nobody was coming in with the resources. So, yeah, you're right. So that leads us to our topic today, which is something that me and Daph wanted to talk about, which is just life course development, life course in aging, with a specific focus on the Black community. We just thought it was interesting because, when we talk about the life course of Black people or people in general, I don't think we really had these conversations of certain marks that are supposed to hit. What are the differences or unique experiences with our community within the life course? What does it look like as we age? And one of the reasons I actually had this idea is because I was watching the Kanye documentary. Have you checked that out?
No, I'm boycotting, but I'll hear about it from you.
Yeah, I have boycotted. That's the funny thing. I haven't, since Kanye been on his brand, I haven't watched or listened to any Kanye albums. But I've seen so many people talking about it. And, a lot of my friends were talking about, because I was a fan of old Kanye, as we say. And so it's a 3-part documentary. And pretty much the first 2 parts are all about old Kanye. And so I was interested just to see what the flip happened, because Kanye was very more in the community, very pro-Black. We heard him say, George Bush don't like Black people, and he wanted to be a Black billionaire. He was just very much like a little bit more conscious and, sensitive to Black topics. And then there was a flip that occurred, and we see the Kanye that is the Kanye today. So I was just super curious just to see what happens. And a part of it was just the biggest thing was that his mom passed away. Right. And I think it was, single mom. It was just him and his mom. And as he became more famous, he actually kept her around a lot more. And she was a part of his team, doing all kinds of events. And she was an educator as well. Sweetest woman, like the sweetest woman. And they had a really tight relationship. And I think after she passed, he didn't deal with the grief. And a week later, he was just working in the studio, and he never really fully dealt with it. And I felt that led to other issues, which I think maybe exacerbated things into him getting diagnosed with bipolar. And that shows as well. I think a lot of the Kanye we see now has to do with mental illness, because even his boy, who was recorded in documentaries since 1998 until now, he actually had to stop recording a few times recently, like when they're in Wisconsin, because he said he got too uncomfortable because the rants he were going in didn't make sense. And he was clearly having an episode, but he still wanted to show some clips of that, because this is the stuff we don't see. We just see the behavior in him doing all these things. So a lot of it just stems from the switch happened, I believe, when his mom passed away. And then now it exacerbated with mental illness and him never really dealing with grief. I think this is why he's more so into religion now and doing the choirs and talking about God and all this other kind of stuff. I think that's what he turned to, which is something that, I'll talk about in a second when we talk about life course, because it's all connected. I think, it was a well put together documentary with just showing what happened to Kanye and his current trajectory, and kind of I think this is what happens when you have also mental illness and you're almost like a billionaire, right? And so it's like people can't tell you what to do because you just have so much money that you're going to do it regardless. And when you have these episodes, it's tough to kind of not really say control someone, but have that kind of support. What I would say, what it is good, is that towards the end, Kanye has begun to surround because even the person who's filming the documentary was like one of his close friends, and they became close. And then once Kanye's mom had died, he pretty much cut off everybody that was close to him. And so he started being surrounded by yes people and people that they stopped talking for 6 years, and people that he grew up with. And now all those people he's brought back into his life. And you can tell the difference because they kind of tell Kanye about himself, like, nah, you shouldn't do this, or nah, this is not. And he listens compared to before with all these yes people around him. So I think we'll start to see a difference, hopefully, when you bring the family and people that know you and actually care about you back around and that you listen to. But we'll see. But all that stuff, kind of matters. And it kind of had me spark the topic of, let's talk about life course. And because I think one of the things we're seeing now with a lot of these Black music artists is that we never really saw our music artists age, right? When we talk to folks like Jay-Z or Beyonce and Kanye, right? We see them when they're young and what they do. And now it's like a different tune they speak when they're now approaching their 50s. And it's like, oh, these cats are talking differently. And so we actually get to live because of social media and see how Black folks are handling, this environment as they grow and head into different spaces in life. So we can talk about life course and at least the basics of it and what it is before we start getting into some specifics about the Black community.
Yeah. So when you proposed this, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Because, when I think about my first introduction to like a life course perspective, it was as an undergrad. So my major was human and organizational development.
Okay.
So you began with human development before you talked about, how organizations develop. And so for me, it was more like the social, psychological like take on like life course and the various stages of life and what like the ways that we have to resolve particular types of tensions in our lives as we go from, being a baby to being a toddler to elementary age, adolescence, adulthood, middle adulthood, and then like older age. And that was always really interesting to me to have in the back of my mind, like, okay, what are the tensions that I'm likely weighing and have to resolve in order to like potentially reach the next stage or phase in life. But of course, like life course perspective is like multidisciplinary. And there's a scholar in particular who talked about like the 5 distinct principles of it. I don't know if you looked into.
I don't know if I saw that, Scott. I saw an article that presented or had the multiple principles and stuff like that.
It was like Gillian Elder, like that's where it came from. So like in thinking about what we mentioned about, desegregation and segregation, like it speaks to a really important principle in the life course because like time and place, when you're born, when you grow up, where you grow up, it matters for how you experience things and even potentially your life outcome. So like time and place is one of those things. Like being a millennial, graduating during the Great Recession, graduating from college during the Great Recession, that has impacted a lot of life course events and stages that I think many of us are supposed to be making our way through at this time, but aren't because of time and place issues.
I always think about the studies and the writings that are going to come about from us the millennial generation. I just feel like we experience so many things. Like I think about the history that Maya is going to be reading about and talking about in her classes. And I'm like, and I'll be able to tell her firsthand, like from, I think for us, it really started probably our biggest event was like 9/11. And then it just kept going and going, after that for some time. But yeah, the life course. And I think thinking about, we know that millennials, we start families later. We start careers later. We approach work differently, more of a work-life balance compared to generations in the past. We're not as loyal to companies. We're not staying at a company for 30, 40 years like in the past. We're having less kids, right? So I think, when you think about just our generation in particular, there are some changes, right, compared to past generations as far as what's expected in the life course, and probably even more so thinking about Gen Z and then the generation beyond. What will those changes be, right? Now, the introduction of things like social media and stuff like that, which were introduced in our lifetime, right? But we were older. We didn't get it at the age of 5, but probably more so late teens, early 20s, where it started to become more prevalent. So we still had a childhood, traditional, or not traditional, but I guess the old school childhood compared to what they have now.
Riding bikes and
bikes, climbing trees.
Yes. Oh my God. I love my childhood.
It's good when you think about it in that way and kind of at each phase, what are we thinking about? And thinking about my 20s, I think about my 30s now, and how 30s seem to be a real career building decade, if you will. And I feel like 40s and beyond is more like family, and I don't know. I just feel like my 30s have just been like career oriented for a lot. I mean, of course, starting a family and getting all those kind of really adult things out the way, but it's just like I can see get where I want to be, and then once I get to my 40s, I'm trying to be chilling and having fun with the kids and traveling and all that kind of stuff. I ain't trying to be working hard forever.
So building on that, so one of the life stage particular theories that I really liked was Erickson's 8 stages. And so thinking about like where we are now, 20s to 40. So he like breaks the stages down from like birth through first year, toddler, preschool, elementary, adolescence, and then early adulthood, which is where we are, 20s to 40s. And the tension that is generally being resolved during this stage is like intimacy versus isolation.
Okay.
This is when many of us find like our long-term relationships, get married, start families. But this can be a very difficult stage if you didn't resolve like some of the tensions in the earlier stages. And
I can see that.
And so, and it's like thinking about like, okay, you mentioned 40s. Okay, that's middle adulthood. So like from 40s to 60s, the tension that you're trying to resolve is generativity versus stagnation. And that is when you really like generativity is like your investment in the next generation and like the legacy you're building and like how you're sowing into others versus, you know, stagnation. Like as you progress through that, like you might begin wondering like whether you're going to leave a mark on the world in a meaningful way. And so, you know, you talked about like, oh, the family and the vacation, like that's still you like building experiences for the next generation. Like we've been building our career, but I see that's when like, okay, how am I going to mentor and like make sure the next generation of academics or the next generation of, so like that's
that
when
makes sense, yeah.
It's the me phase in the sense that like you might be building your career and stuff, but it's also like creating that family unit or like really sinking into isolation. And I feel like that is becoming increasingly a thing with social media, with like, have you ever heard of the term incel? So I don't know the exact definition, or I don't like know like the dictionary definition. I don't even know if it's a real word, but like usually incels is related to like the guys who are like living in their parents' basement, like no real social relationships outside of like maybe the ones they build on the internet. And like there has been like a lot of conversation about like the growth or rise in incels. And now people have been talking about like female incels or like these people who are like super duper isolated and haven't like as they're going through this 20s to 40s, they aren't building meaningful relationships. Let me actually see. It's okay. An incel definition wise is a member of an online community of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women. And like they're typically viewed as like hostile to women, but there's been like a growth in this incel culture to where beyond the internet, you're completely isolated from other people.
No, that's good. You know, I didn't know about that. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we see those kind of characters on like, you know, TV shows and stuff like that.
What's that show? Oh, it used to have Shamar Moore. They were like the FBI. They do the profiles.
I don't remember the
name of it, but yeah, like they would fit a profile.
Those kind of profiles, yeah, those incels. I feel like I might even heard that term actually. Now I think about it, on one of those kind of shows, like them Law and Order and investigative shows that come about. So you know, that's important. I think that's important, and I'm glad you mentioned because I was going to ask like what is that? What is our next phase supposed to look like? Supposed to focus on. So it feels like I'm in the right, you know, ballpark, on the right track as far as what I was expecting to do in the midlife. Oh man, this is like dealing with aging. Like it's something I really never thought about it, and probably until I started getting to my mid 30s, and I'm like, oh wow, like this is like it's just a different psychological, I don't know, process compared to when you're younger. You're not fully thinking about aging as much, like being 40 and 50 and that kind of stuff. But I feel like, yeah, once I hit around, I'm not 35 yet, but I'm about to be, I just think about it a lot more. Like once you get closer to 40, I feel like it's just that big number. It just separates you a little bit. And it's like, do I want to be separated? Do I not want to be separated? Like I appreciate my youth, but now I'm getting to that age where I'm grown. And, you know, you just approach life differently, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that definitely is the time, because the final stage, which is like 60s plus, it's where you're, you know, resolving the tension, you know, between like integrity and despair, like integrity and feeling a sense of satisfaction around like how you lived your life, or despair related to all the regrets you have about what you didn't do.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, as you approach that generativity versus stagnation phase, yeah, you really want to think about, like, when I look back, how will I feel?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, that's real. That's real. I think that's important. I know, I can't remember, maybe it was a show or a book or something. I know it was something, somebody was like following folks. Maybe we talked about on this podcast long time ago. Somebody was following folks who were on their deathbed and like asking them like what they, what did they care about or what did they want? And, to no surprise, it wasn't the cars, it wasn't the TVs, it wasn't like, they said what they remembered the most were experiences and connections and friends and family, more so than like the materialistic stuff. And then, I just think that's important to keep in mind, like as we age and what we value, and kind of, especially like, you have those things where your life flashes before your eyes. Like, what do you think you're going to see? You're going to see that 65-inch TV or that nice car. You're going to think about, the folks that you may be living behind and opportunities or feelings and emotions you may have. So I think it's important that as we grow old to begin to cherish those things. And that's something I know I've done for sure. Not that I never didn't do that, but I feel like I've been more conscious of just cherishing moments and experiences. Because again, I think for us too, Daph, right, as we get older, our parents get older, right? And so I think that's a real thought of dealing with, aging parents, something that we, again, didn't have to think about in our teens and 20s as much. And now that we're approaching our 40s, it's like, oh, wow, our parents are getting up there and hopefully have some health complications and issues that are more concerning, again, psychologically, stressors and stuff that we typically didn't have to carry that burden before. I think we now think about, right? And they become a reality. And it's a lot. It's a lot when you age. I think that just changes that. I think I don't think I was fully prepared for, right? And I wish I've at least had conversations about this phase with folks, maybe who were in their 30s and 40s that I didn't have. And I don't think had known that many people probably as well in that age bracket. But I wish I just had conversations probably in my 20s, just to have in the back of my mind, like, hey, this is kind of normal. This is what you're going to be experiencing when you get to that next phase. And I think that's something I probably should do right now, right? Start having these conversations with people in their 40s and 50s to say, hey, this is when I was in my 30s, I wasn't thinking about this, and you'll probably think about this, and it's normal. So you can kind of have that expectation.
It's so interesting because you talked about, or you mentioned like the life flashing before your eyes. And a couple weeks ago, I was actually going to do it as like, oh my goodness, news or something like that, because there was recently a study that it tracked like the brain activity of a dying man. And it suggested, that your life really does flash before your eyes, because it was something about the brain waves that it like was similar to what happens like with like memory recall or something like that.
When you're dreaming.
So they call it's called life recall theory. And what do you think will flash at those times?
Yeah, no, that's real. Yeah. And yeah, I guess it's true. I guess some scientific evidence that it's true when folks say that, there's some flashing that occurs. Yeah, that's crazy to think about. But yeah, the fact that they tracked, and I know they tracked the brain waves accidentally. Because I think that they were scanning the brain. I think that person died while they were scanning it, and then they had this type of information. So I wonder, ethically, I know there's probably a lot of guidelines, but there may be folks who agree to that kind of surveillance or when they're, on their last few days or so.
Yeah, I can see that. One other thing I wanted to mention, because you talked about like Kanye West, and I think about, because one of the other principles of life course perspective or theory is timing, the timing of various events. So you think about like the death of a parent as you are, reaching career milestones, or even you think about like the death of a parent and how that might impact someone who hasn't reached adulthood, and how the timing of certain events can be really pivotal in terms of what the rest of our trajectory looks like. So a pandemic happening, because one thing I was reading is how like this pandemic, as these Gen Zers are like graduating from high school and entering like a precarious labor market, as we have the pandemic and now, a war that is impacting us indirectly, but, things could pop off and like impact us, more directly. The timing of these events are super duper important. And so I'm even thinking about like the teens that I know that are finishing high school. Like, what can I do to be of a little bit more guidance, knowing that like this is a really sensitive time for them to be entering adulthood. And given that, like, they might not be able to resolve the identity versus role confusion aspect of their development, because it is like these teenage years that they figure out their role in the world and who they're supposed to be. And if they're graduating into such uncertainty, how might that impact them?
Yeah. No, that's real. Because again, like I said, when 9/11 happened, we were in high school. And so it was a big, event for a lot of millennials. And I know that, that when that happened, of course, like you said, a lot of things, people are trying to figure things out. And I just remember that sticking with a lot of people, especially I lived in Jersey. So, I had classmates whose families died as a result. And then the subsequent war after that. And I had a lot of classmates that actually went to the military, right? As a result, like that impact of like our country was attacked or war, and what am I going to do about it? I'm going to, take up arms. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again mentality as well. So it's just, and then I think how we gauge politics as well during that time period. It just leaves an imprint, right? And I think a lot of fear, especially when you're young, a lot of fear is attached to that. Like, oh, I'm only, 14. And now we see this war and we see everybody talking about it. We see bombs, we see nuclear scares. It's like, that's going to stick with, like you said, it's going to stick with a lot of these teenagers. And how will that impact them as they develop, as they move forward, choices they make with that fear in the back of your mind? I think it is important, like you said, for those of us who have experienced similar things. I'm pretty much sure every generation has experienced some form of war. It's rare in America for us not to be able to talk them through it or say, hey, this is kind of normal. It's going to be okay. We've seen this before, right? Throughout our history or whatever it is. But I think acknowledging, right, that what they're experiencing is real. And you can have certain feelings and emotions around it. So yeah, I like that take.
Yeah. I have a question because you are, a scholar, you study criminal justice. Have you read the, I think it was Petite and Western article that talked about imprisonment being a new stage in the life course for structurally disadvantaged Black men, because it's something that this particular group experiences so often?
Yeah, I cover that a little bit in my crim theory course when we talk about life course and criminology. And essentially the argument they're making that it becomes normalized, just like going to school and graduating high school, right? Or getting a job. Getting married. It's just a part of the process, which has a lot of implications, right? One is that, of course, that's something that shouldn't be normalized. But two, even folks within the community, because folks that are not from these communities will look at somebody who gets incarcerated and put this massive stigma on them. But in the community, they don't have that kind of stigma because it's hard to find somebody who hasn't experienced some form of arrest or carceral engagement. And so, yeah, that has become, for a lot of young, particularly Black men living in impoverished neighborhoods, that has become the norm. But then they're again talking about life course and how, like you said, how one phase can mess up than future phases. And so with getting carceral contact at an early stage, we know the implications that has for your lifelong kind of successes, right? The chances of you getting opportunities for jobs, for education, loans, all this kind of stuff, right? It really damages that. So yeah, no, it's real. It's real. And life course too, I know one of the biggest things when we talk about life course theory and criminology is that I think, which is important to know, and I think a lot of advocates and activists, I'm sure they know this, but when we talk about changing policy, is that we should really stop using the criminal justice system to handle cases with minors. because what happens is it's actually very normal, no matter what your background is, what community in, between the ages of like 16 and 22 is when people are at the most at risk for just delinquency, committing acts, right? You're independent especially when you're 16, think about it, you're probably getting your first car. You don't have a job. You don't have a family typically, right? So you're getting some money, maybe if you have a job. So you have like all of this freedom, but without like the pressures of actually having responsibility. And so with those things combined, you're more likely to take more risk. And so what happens is that law enforcement, the criminal justice system is set up where they criminalize 16-year-olds in Black communities that are doing what normal 16-year-olds do everywhere. Right. So this act is a criminal act and we'll throw you in the system, versus if you're in an affluent community, if you're white, we treat you as a 16-year-old. Oh, you're doing something silly, you get a slap on the wrist, you keep it moving. So I think we have to really push back on any kind of policy that seeks to criminalize. I know the governor here, Governor Murphy, New Jersey, had a lot of backlash from law enforcement when they were passing the marijuana, legalizing marijuana, because he made it clear that he did not want police to be able to arrest any minors for smoking marijuana. And police did not want that. They wanted to continue arresting these people for smoking marijuana. And he was like, no, I'm not passing any law that does not have this language in it. And so he pushed and he got it. And so now, under the age of 18, you can't be charged criminal, can't be arrested. You just get hit with a fine or a sanction, but nothing that's super damaging. So I thought that's important, that even our political leaders need to be cognizant of these kind of things in the language, because there's no reason a 16-year-old should be, for anything nonviolent, particularly, should not be getting any kind of, major life-changing contact with the criminal justice system.
Absolutely. My niece actually really hates when my sister kind of reminds her of this, or, tries to use this to say like, hey, maybe you don't know everything. But, your brain isn't fully developed until about the age of 25. Mm-hmm. And there's been research that suggests that adults and teens use different parts of the brain. They use it differently. And so adults usually think with their prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thought, and just children, they're just not there yet. And I think that you can speak more about that is contributed to conversations about like whether children should receive life sentences, isn't that something that's being like pushed back against? Because it's like getting a life sentence for something that was done when developmentally you weren't able to think as rationally as like an adult.
No, 100%. A lot of pushback with that. Even just trying minors as adults, like this just doesn't make sense, because the ramifications of that, even when you get to an adult facility, you're segregated, and you're in isolation, right, until you become of a certain age. So yeah, all the psychological effects of that, and the real life consequences of trying them as an adult. And again, researchers show that when we talk about life course theory and criminology, is that folks age out of crime, right? No matter what. Sampson Allowed, their research showed that the life crime curve. Because before them, it was this idea that the trajectory of life course offending was folks, life career criminals committed all the way until they died. But that's not the case. It hits this peak for everyone, and then it just goes down. And age is the biggest factor. And so a lot of people have been questioning generally, even just, should we have people in prison for life? Because once you get to the age around 60, you are no longer a threat, social harm. You change psychologically as far as what you can and can't do. And criminal offending is just not a big worry. And so for a lot of, especially these nonviolent offenses, folks who are in there for 40 years, et cetera, there's been a push, especially if we're trying to decarcerate, of getting those elderly folks out, because a lot of tax dollars will still be wasting on the aging population, and they're no longer a harm. So the goal is we're separating folks because we think that they're still a threat. But if they're no longer a threat and it's been 20 years, should we continue to, allow them in, especially with minors, like you said, for sure, missing a lot. You go in at 16, you come out at 35, right? 36, you're missing a lot of crucial developmental stuff, right? In those 20s and 30s that you're coming back out as almost knowing as much as a 16-year-old did when you went in. And that's a scary situation. But the world looks at you as like a 36-year-old and expects you to be where a normal 36-year-old would be.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. I'm actually reading the book Halfway Home right now. Ruben Miller.
Miller, yeah.
And it's so interesting, like hearing the stories of, some of these people who had been incarcerated, and at least where I am now, many of them left and went on to like live like very fruitful lives. Although, there was like this sometimes difficult part of like the re-entry and not necessarily having the resources you need to not potentially reoffend. But yeah, it seems like at least in these first couple of chapters, like these older gentlemen had really like settled into a new normal in life that actually involved like generativity and like giving back. And
For sure. I know his book has been, hot right now. We try to get him on. Hopefully we'll get him on at some point, because when we did try to get him on, it was at the height of the book release, and he was like all over the place. And so maybe now we can retry that again, because I think that is something worth discussing. Just the transition period of folks getting out and how a lot of that stuff isn't addressed when we talk about what's needed. I know even with education, they've talked about this, like changing the approach of folks who are incarcerated, of like, and expecting them to come out and be able to go to like college immediately, when a lot of scholars have said, no, there's like a socialization process that occurs. Like if you were incarcerated all this time and now all of a sudden you go out into a college classroom, it's a completely different environment. And so they're like promoting learning or taking college classes inside, right? So you get familiar with the flow, the atmosphere, the expectations, and then it's a quicker and easier transition for when you leave and you go. So I think that approach should be taken more, having overlap between, especially folks who are about to leave, right? Here's some services, here are some things, here's how the world operates, instead of just you jumping right into it. And then now you're starting from scratch with very little resource, because nobody's really trying to give folks who've been incarcerated any kind of resources, which is a whole nother conversation.
Agree. Was it always the case that people who were previously incarcerated could get federal financial aid, or is that something new?
That was something that it was the case, and then it wasn't the case, because when they started the tough on crime stuff, war on drugs, that's the stuff they pulled, because a lot of that was federal funding. And so a lot of places are trying to bring those back, but there's still always a lot of pushback. It's like, why are we funding felons, et cetera, et cetera. But it used to actually be a lot more. My dad, he was a correctional officer for over 20 years, and he saw the change. And pretty much when he started, he was like, a lot of the guys who were inmates were getting, bachelor's degrees pretty much for free while they were inside, and coming out with this. And he was always kind of, he's like, I have to pay for my kids' college, and then they get to get it for free. And they're locked up. Which is a real take, because I'm sure a lot of folks say that, like, okay, so if I commit a crime, I can get a free bachelor's degree. But that was one of the narratives used to push back against it. And then this is why I promote, like, we need to have free education, right? Because then it doesn't matter. Everyone gets it for free.
Everybody gets it, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I know you wanted to dig into more life course issues as it relates to the Black population. So we've talked about like the criminal justice or injustice system. Like, what are some other?
Yeah, a couple of things I found. A lot of stuff was health related. One article looking at pretty much, I wanted to look at this one because it's looking at how later life is looking for Black people in COVID, during COVID, and have there been any changes with that in particular. And they were just looking at, have coping mechanisms changed? And one of the things that said that was interrupted a little bit, right, historically with the Black community, and I didn't really know this, but then I looked into it a little more closely, that aging Blacks typically report lower like bouts and rates of like mental illness and depression. But then looking into it further, a part of it is saying that Blacks are typically misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. So kind of tread carefully with that statistic. But they said one of the biggest coping mechanisms for elderly Blacks has been religion and the church, where they report folks who commonly go to church and stuff like that, report lower levels of like stress or stress-induced, psychological issues. And so with COVID happening, right, one of the biggest issues was that folks couldn't really go to church as much, and that had a kind of modern day effect on how elderly Blacks were able to cope with their stress, and they had to figure out new ways to cope with it because the church wasn't as readily available as it once was during that time period. I thought that was interesting, right? Because these are things we don't typically think about. And so now would we see, of course, the report then, because it was still currently happening when they were doing the study, the long-term effects of that. You're like, are we going to see other platforms or coping mechanisms be used? Are we going to see higher rates of reported depression, anxiety, and stuff like that from elderly Blacks because of the lack of a major resource? So I thought that was interesting, just to talk about, the mental well-being of our aging Black community in the middle of COVID.
So a family member recently, disclosed to me that the last few years have just been incredibly difficult as they have managed the isolation of COVID-19, like not really being able to leave the house, not being able to do very much. And, they had a very good weekend that was like planned for them. And I think it was kind of like I really needed this because, and it was like, this has just been like really amazing. So yes, it has been impacting people. And I also know how busy I have felt over the course of the pandemic and how, so in addition to being like isolated in homes, I feel like I don't know if people are talking as much. So like I have like closed in a little bit more in terms of like really checking in on like my closest friends and my closest family members and trying to be a support system for them. But that means that like some people might not be getting the attention that they normally would have gotten if like we had like a working relationship together, or so it's just kind of like thinking about how that has impacted people in terms of like, this is my pod, these are my people that I'm like really zoning in on during this like really difficult time. And some people, that means they lost maybe acquaintances or people that they were in contact with, but not as much because it's like, I don't have time for everything that's happening in life while I'm also really trying to focus in on these relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. And I think that's an introspective thing, thinking about things I reflected on as I've been getting older, is the value of time. And like prioritizing I just feel like when I was younger, I just feel like I had all the time in the world. I just didn't really think about time as much. I was like, I had time to do this, do that, do everything I want to do. And now that I'm like, where do people find the time to do anything? And it's just like a real concern of like, just like you said, yes, you put the time in to make sure you're contacting loved ones, but don't have the time to do it for everyone. And your personal, your marriage, your work life, all these kind of things. It's like, whoa. And it's crazy how everything kind of expedited or exacerbated during the pandemic. Like I felt like we probably should have had more time, but it felt like we had less time. I don't know why it feels that way, but I know a lot of people have been feeling like we've just been like just running, playing catch up this whole time, and still doing so. I feel like it's getting better for some folks, but Daphne and I, we've had conversations about just the culture of academia right now and how once it was like super easy for us to get interviews, and now it's just like, what is going on?
Everybody got their no committee, and they're like, no.
And we can't blame them. We get it for sure. But I think the pandemic has had some kind of like weird effect on this approach. And then mentioning too, the thing about isolation, I think it's important because I wonder if that's something that the older you get, contact, socializing becomes more important. Because I remember seeing at the height of the pandemic where, families and we're separating everybody, and the elderly, like the grandparents couldn't see the grandkids. And then when they would like see each other through the windows, like I would see grandparents being like super emotional and like crying. And like, I'm like, wow, this is like really important to them. Like for me, I didn't feel like personally, I was like, fine, right? I was like, okay, we got to get used to this, everybody. I felt like it's temporary. We'll see each other. But just to see how emotionally it impacted a lot of the folks who are older. And then again, like folks not being able to go to church and things like that, like that human interaction, that socializing seems to might be even more important the more you age, because I don't know why, right? But I think there's probably something to that isolation has more of an impact then than it probably has to folks like you and I.
Yeah. I think it's because this is when, you've lived your life and now it's time for you to give back and be invested in another generation that you have been cut off from because of the pandemic. And, even beyond that, like with the COVID-19 pandemic, life expectancy it decreased, which should not be surprising. I found the article that said, if American children born today spent their entire lives under the conditions of 2020, they'd live on average about 1.5 years like less or like than if they were born in like 20 or if the conditions were like 2019. And so it was like the life expectancy went down from like 78.8 to 77.3. That's like a year and a half of life though.
No, that's real. And I know I've seen things too where the Black life expectancy is generally just shorter than the white life expectancy as well. So even for Black folks, that's some more years shaved off.
Yep. I think it's like 74 for Black people and like 78 or ish for like white people.
Yep, 78.3 for white and 73.3 for Black. So yep, hit it right on the nail.
But also there are differences that are like important to like look into because life expectancy also gender plays a role. So for instance, I think Black men have their life expectancy is about 5 years shorter than white people versus 3.3 years shorter for Black women.
Yeah, I can see that. Because I think men generally have a shorter life expectancy than women as well. So when we throw intersectionality on that, I'm sure it definitely is even worse. A lot of it has to do I was trying to look at this. Why is the case? A lot of it for the Black community is historical, right? Just exclusion from a lot of services, economic exclusion, and that leads to not being able to afford things like healthcare and resources, and then healthy eating. And then on top of that, the racial stressors and all this kind of cumulative stress and cumulative effects really just reduce the life chances. But I would say that too, like a lot of I would say, even though there was like different reports or questioning reports of like overall well-being of the Black community, it does seem that the Black community do report having just lower psychological like anxiety and stress the older we get. And maybe it's just because we're just born into this and we just kind of learn how to live with it maybe more and deal with stress potentially more and more resilient, that it doesn't, not that it doesn't impact us at all, but maybe it just doesn't impact us as much. But then I'm sure there can be some questions in that if we're just underreported and not studied enough to really, maybe we just handle it differently, right, compared to the white majority when it comes to these things like mental illness and longevity effects of, racism and things of that nature. But we know things like hypertension, all this kind of stuff is also reduced, stress induced, and can be related to race and discrimination too.
It reminds me of, I think I saw this on like Twitter. It was like, because the saying like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and like people have increasingly been saying like I don't want to go through anything that doesn't kill me but makes me stronger. But like I think I won't say that is the Black experience, but it's kind of like going through a lot of things. And I don't necessarily feel like we have all the most positive coping skills, but like having to cope, you maybe don't have the mental well-being issues associated with the coping, but it's the physical toll.
I can see that
it takes on your body.
I can see that. I could definitely see that more in our community. Because we'll do other things we'll eat it, we'll drink it, we'll smoke it, we'll do maybe, of course we can find some healthy ways as well, but typically what we see, right, are those kind of unhealthy physical behaviors. And that's maybe the way we, like you said, demonstrate our stress. It relieves it at the same time, but then it causes other issues, right, that may also contribute to a lower life expectancy. So it's all important. I know there's tons of articles that I saw that were coming up that I didn't get too much into, but a lot of the reason why folks are talking about this is saying there just needs to be culturally appropriate ways to care for this or handle this, mainly for either psychologists or doctors, right? Saying that we need to consider these cultural differences if we're trying to put in effective interventions to help them change behavior and things of that nature. You have to kind of know what's going on, why they're doing it, and then what ways culturally that they actually would feel acceptable, right? Because a lot of times we know in the Black community, we're not trying to really go see a therapist, right? So what ways might be alternatives to get them to still move on the right track in the right direction instead of just preaching this only one strategy, right? And so I think that's important when you're engaging with many different demographics is realize what's acceptable, what they're used to, and what more likely is realistic to help them get into a healthier lifestyle. All this stuff is important.
Yeah, agreed.
But okay, anything else in closing? I think that covered a lot about this topic, and there's so much more I know we can talk about. But maybe we'll cover it again, or hopefully maybe we can find somebody down the line, especially if our listeners know anybody, get somebody on to talk about their expertise in this area too.
Yeah. I thought it was a good conversation. You know, what I hope people can take from it is like really thinking about these different stages and how they can make sure like there's progression so that when, you know, you do look back, you're really satisfied, or like thinking about the stages and thinking about how you can help like the next generation as they navigate these really big societal, you know, events that will potentially impact their development and their success moving forward. So hope that's a lesson that people can take from this.
No, agreed. All of this, like I said, I just feel like we don't talk about this enough, and I'm glad we took the time to kind of talk about this. Just like we live in a world, and everybody has their own life, and we kind of worry about the now, this year, next year, a couple years later. But what's that next phase supposed to look like? Because, like you said, that's really sticking out. Is like when I have friends that didn't handle the stressors or the pressures from the previous like age bracket and now are like dealing with it now and trying to play catch up, and it's adding a lot more stressors on them. And so it's important to, I guess, keep things in mind, age appropriate stuff when we're engaging with folks who are younger, like teenagers versus 20-year-olds versus 30-year-olds, right? And 40, 50, just having a general sense of what the expectations are, what they may be going through, and how we can be of service or at least apply the appropriate, adequate resources, right, to help them through any issues. And again, it's also just good for us to know, right? Hey, is it normal? Are we feeling that what we're feeling? Is that normal? What can we expect moving forward? What should we expect moving forward? And how to deal with things if we're not feeling like where we need to be, which I know for us millennials, sometimes that feels like a lot because like we're dealing with social media age as well. We're kind of one of the first generations to experience that, seeing people, getting this house here and getting this kid here and getting this car and this job here. And I feel like that adds, for our generation compared to previous generations, that's a definitely added element. The use of social media and positioning and life course trajectory, trying to figure out, oh man, what is going on here? But I think we're learning now how to deal with it as time's been going on. But okay, so for our listeners, if you haven't yet, follow us on social media at BHD Podcast, or on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Also, I just went ahead and started a TikTok account for us. So now we have these video clips. I can upload the YouTube video clips on there as well. So I haven't and actually never uploaded anything with TikTok, but we can experiment with it. At least I know the bare minimum folks can at least find these clips on TikTok. And if we decide to use it in other ways, maybe that'll come down the line, but I am no TikTok expert, so we'll see how that works. So you can start following us on TikTok as well if you have an account, and you can catch some of our content on there. You can
trying to keep up with these young whippersnappers.
Trying to keep up with the young folks, that if that's where they are, go where they are and see maybe if they can get some of this BHD knowledge as well. Maybe it can be of use to them. And I feel like conversations like this can be useful to them as well. So if this is where we can attract some younger folks, maybe we'll see if it works. And you can visit our website, blackandhighlydangerous.com, to keep up with our latest content. You can email us, bhdpodcast@gmail.com. Appreciate that. We actually had a listener email us this past week just saying, very, very happy to learn, and had a quick comment about the word you gave us last week. What was it, Daph?
Stagflation.
Stagflation, yes, that was the subject of the of the email, and I think it was an older gentleman, but he was saying like he remembered learning about that word. I think with one of the previous kind of wars or something we had, and he was like, "Oh, it just had me thinking about that." So I'm glad you guys brought that up, and I appreciate that. Kind of had a little laugh. I was like, "Okay, that's cool."
Well, we also had a laugh about a word you said. My sister texted me. She was like, "Oh my God, the episode was so informative. She loved it. She loved it." She said, "Tell Tyrell to stop watching Fox News when you said the black." He said, "Stop watching Fox News."
Oh, that was funny. I don't know what I was thinking. I probably was watching too much Fox News, trying to get some other reporting going in. And it just became ingrained in my mind. And I slipped up, said the blacks. But no, that was funny when I thought about shaking my head to myself, like, what did I?
It was hilarious. I have laughed about that especially when she texted me about that. I laughed about it always.
No, that was funny. But luckily I said it, and I'm not like a white person that said it, because it could have been way worse. But yeah, she's right. I gotta tone down my conservative media outlets when I'm trying to get some of these reports coming in, because now it's getting too ingrained in my mind. And good Lord knows, let me slip up in class or something like that, my students going to tear me apart. Oh yes, all good. Share not watchers. Go to our website if you haven't, blackandhighlydangerous.com. Email us bhdpodcast@gmail.com. Like I said, we're on YouTube now. And so please write a review on YouTube, like us on YouTube, review and rate us on iTunes as well. That helps us out with the algorithms. Both help us out. So wherever you're listening to us, please just, click a like, write a comment. And that helps us out with the algorithm so people can find us. And then you can actually share us with your friends, share us with your family, share us with your enemies. And as always, continue to be the oppressor's worst fear.
If you're interested in continuing this and other conversations, visit our website, blackandhighlydangerous.com, to subscribe to our email list, suggest topics, and participate in our discussion forums.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook @BHD Podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast on your favorite platform. And as always, continue to be the oppressor's worst fear.